Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the know-hows of real estate. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the title and escrow process in real estate. And today, we have a special guest that is a title escrow manager in Arizona. And we're going to talk a little bit about the title process. And then I have my trusty little co-host there, Mike Stensrud, and Sandra Sias is going to be our title person today. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can't wait, Kevin. Let's roll.
All right. So, Sandra, let's just kind of dive into with a little explanation of what is title insurance.
Title insurance. Okay. So, this is a question that a lot of people, even when I tell them, like I do escrow, people don't understand what that is. So when you are selling your home, basically a title company is insuring your property. And when I say that, that's meaning we are taking on the responsibility of doing a full title search to make sure that there are no liens, encumbrances, judgments, mortgages, taxes, back taxes. So when we handle the escrow, we pay everything through closing. So when title is transferred to the new owner, title is clear. So we are ensuring that. So if anything should come up, say that we miss an encumbrance and we don't pay taxes, it kind of falls back on us if that were the case and that were to happen. So we have to make sure that we are checking, all the boxes to make sure that we are transferring clear title to the buyer.
I think that is sometimes, I don't know if you get it or not, but once in a while when we go over the settlement statement with a buyer and they see the information on the settlement statement and they go, why am I doing that? But that's the reason why. They're protecting their property in case there was some encumbrances on it.
Correct. And title, and a lot of people, like now with deed fraud and people stealing property, a homeowner's policy covers that. So if you, and I know that people now with the way that our market is are trying to just go the easy, let's just deed property, let's just deed without doing title searches or not having the correct policies in place. If you do have a homeowner policy, I know a lot of you have watched that, that there's that commercial for LifeLock and they cover deed fraud. Well, a homeowner's policy also covers deed fraud. So we issue homeowner policies on that. So you're covered for all of those issues if that should arise.
Okay. So as a real estate agent and we get a contract accepted and we're going to send all the documentation to you so that you guys can open up escrow. And what is the key to opening up escrow?
Key is providing us with everyone's info up front. So when I get a contract in, I will definitely reach out to both agents, ask for buyer and seller information immediately. And of course, we collect earnest money, all of that stuff up front. We contact the buyer, let them, ask them how they want to deposit, if that's a wire, cashier's check, whatever that may be. But getting their information up front is really important. So we can, send out opening letters so we can have all of their info for mortgage, payoff, homeowners, association, all of that good stuff. And mainly when it's opening escrow, we're more concerned about the seller's information than the buyer's, because we have to order so many documents up front so they can disclose to you guys and to buyers and sellers, HOA information if there's any back dues, all of that stuff. So that's super important, and that would ultimately delay us. And it has in the past when an agent doesn't provide us with the seller's information and we can't order a payoff. So that stuff is really important to have.
Okay. So when we open up that escrow officer or escrow file, what does that, it's probably pretty important that an agent would send you all that information kind of up front. That would save you a little bit of time of opening it up, get the buyer's information, the seller's information. We have a form called the new file request form. We like to fill that out and send it all to the escrow officer when we send over the paperwork and the contract.
Yep,
Will that
that's
help you?
great. Absolutely.
Okay. So what is the roles of an escrow officer? Because there's going to be a buyer, seller, an agent, and a lender if it is financed. Um, how do you communicate with all those individuals at one time?
So, as we say, we're the third disinterested party, right? So we're the ones that are in communication with everybody, whether that be phone calls, emails, sometimes text messages with our agents, but we are in contact with everybody because if the buyer's getting a loan, we have to be in contact with their mortgage company because they're going to ask us for specific documents up front. Um, we're in contact with the buyers to let them, know the process of the closing. Obviously, we're in contact with the sellers because we get, payoff information, all of that good stuff. And then, of course, we're in contact with you guys to let you know how the transaction is going, if anything's lacking, if we haven't heard from a lender, which has happened, and we're a week out from closing, and hey, this lender has not reached out to us with, you know, the normal upfront documents. So our job is to be in communication with all parties.
Can that get,
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
yeah, I was going to say, this is a process when you have a lot of people involved in that process. You seem to be the hub. How do you keep it rolling smooth? Do you have any tips, or is there anything that you can share that makes this process work smooth and in timely fashion?
Well, definitely communication, right? So that when I'm in communication with the buyers, then they're at ease. We're letting the agents know, hey, we heard from the lender. Everything, when everybody's doing their part and it falls together nicely, and we can let everybody know that, that's great. But when we don't hear from a lender in a timely manner or they're not asking for something, I automatically know, like, hey, we haven't heard from the lender in the first couple of days. They haven't asked, or even the first week of opening escrow. Um, Something's up, like that, So we will definitely and I will contact the buyer and say, hey, are you using this lender? Because we've not heard from them. Can I have the loan officer's phone number? Because then I like to get in contact with them just to see, is there an issue? Are they still using this lender? Did they switch lenders? Or maybe the loan officer doesn't even know his processor hasn't reached out for these items. So there's a lot that goes into it, and we have to
Yeah.
be on top of that and be able to reach out to all these parties so we keep closing on track.
Is there a big difference between the title insurance and during the process we get what we call a preliminary title report? Is that there a big difference there? One insures the property, and the other one, the preliminary title report. What are we supposed to look at on that?
So you're going to hear that called a few different things. We call it a prelim. It's a title commitment. You hear it called a few different things. But when you get the title commitment is going to share with you there's a lot of information. A lot of people don't know how to read them. Um, and but the main part that we look at is the Schedule B to show what's recorded on the property currently. Are there mortgages? Are there liens? Are there back taxes, judgments, child support? Anything will come up on there. IRS, if the seller, the IRS has something recorded on them, anything will come up on the title report. So for us, that's what we are constantly looking at. Um, and then there's, Schedule A will tell you buyer's information, seller's information, who the lender is, if there is a lender, or if it's cash, it'll say cash transaction. So um, the title commitment can get really in depth if you want to know page to page what it is, because that's what we provide to the lenders at closing, because they'll ask for certain um, items to be included in the title commitment. So when they get their final title policy, it's included. But we could do a whole topic on a title commitment.
Yeah, because a lot of times, even us, my wife Annette is very good at looking through the preliminary title report, and comes up with a couple of things every now and then. But we don't spend a lot of time going through it. But we do look at the Schedule B, so I think
Sure.
that's probably the most important one.
That it is,
Well,
because that's going to show you, especially when you're
mhm.
listing, or even for buyers, so the agents understand what's recorded on there. It is important to know how to read a title commitment. And unfortunately, in our business, as important as the document is, there's several agents that don't know how to read a commitment and don't know what they're looking at.
Maybe
And that's
sometime we
okay.
do another one and talk a little bit more about that. How about that?
Absolutely.
I was going to say that, and that's okay, right? Because that's what you do. I mean, the real
Sure.
estate agent or realtor has so many things they have to manage, and so that's a nice thing to lean on you for those types of things.
Sure. I mean, and they have called me and are like, hey, is title commitment clear? And I will always, if there's something super messy that's not the norm, like a payoff, an HOA, if we're seeing like an IRS judgment, um, something big, child support, something, of that sort, I will definitely call and be like, hey, were you aware that this was on the title commitment? Because half the time they're not. They didn't know. Seller didn't disclose to them, like, hey, this may come up. And obviously, that can affect, depending on how much that is and what their proceeds are, that can become a situation. So when there's something that I see that's not the norm, oh, the agents are getting a phone call for sure, just so I can make everybody aware that this has come up. We're looking into it. We have to order the payoff. Um, and that's just normal because we're used to seeing the normal things, and it's the abnormal things that definitely catch our attention. Like, oh, this is okay. We need to let the agent know that this came up.
Yeah.
There was I don't know if we if the preliminary title report came out first or if it was after the fact. But we got a call from the title company one time, and in the tax records, it didn't indicate it, so it kind of went over our heads until we got a call from the title company saying we need copies of the second trust. A man and lady got married after their other spouses had passed, and they put the property in each other's own trust. And
Mm.
so we were a couple of weeks away from closing, and we had to find the person of the other trust. And so they could have probably said, no, we don't want to sell the property, or would have had to been buyed out. But she ended up going ahead and just agreeing to everything and selling the property. So it went over. But is that what's caught on a preliminary title report?
Sure. And that's why in the beginning, I always pull the last recorded deeds because I want to see who's holding title, because it comes up more often than not that we will get, contract will be written in the seller's names, and then I pull the last recorded deed, and it's in a trust. So I'll have to let the agent know, hey, this is vested in their trust. We need an addendum changing that, and they're like, oh, they had no clue. They didn't tell me, or the agent didn't look it up. Um, so that stuff is really important, and it's always going to show on the last recorded document who currently holds title. And that's why that's super important step to do at the very beginning, because you can catch a lot when you're pulling that first deed to see who's holding title now.
Sounds good.
Well, it
So, Mike,
sounds,
go
yeah, I was
ahead.
going to say, it sounds like I can't tell if you're an air traffic controller or a NFL quarterback. I mean, to manage all the things that you have to do, that's a lot. And to keep it all going smoothly. So, are there any tips that you've learned over the years or suggestions you may make, maybe to a lender or an agent out there to help the process? What are some things that we can do to help make this process as smooth as possible? What are
I would definitely say when an agent calls me and they'll say, hey, just heads up, this is, this seller or buyer. they're giving me the skinny on what's going on with the seller. So I'm aware, um, or they'll call even beforehand and say, hey, we might have an issue. I think that there's maybe, let's just say, a tax lien or something like, so then I can pull all that stuff. But just as long as there's communication and they're telling me, because I have had agents that they try to close a transaction and and this was, for instance, was just a quick story. Um, it was an agent and he was also the seller and he was trying to sell his property. He knew he had an IRS lien for back taxes that he hadn't paid and he thought it had already fallen off. So he didn't disclose it to me. Never said, "Hey, can you search for this?" Um, we get the title commitment and it came up. And I'm like, "Hey, this came up." And, he was upset with us because it came up. And I'm like, well, that's nothing that I can control. Um, so if they can give us that insight beforehand, and long story short, the deal ended up falling apart because he didn't have enough to pay back
Gotcha.
taxes.
Yeah.
So just those kind of things, like let us know. Like let's just be transparent, especially if we're all trying to get to the same goal, and let's share what's going on. And however, maybe a seller has a lot of anxiety about selling. I mean, it's an emotional situation for people that have lived in a property for 30 years. So when they tell us like, hey, the seller is, having a really hard time, they're having to sell either because a spouse passed away or whatever that is, at least we can be sensitive to that, and we're
Yeah.
aware of it. And so I just think when we are given that insight up front, it makes the transaction go so much easier and we're all aware of what's happening. But when we're not sharing things and we're trying to see like, oh, let's just see if it comes up on title, maybe it won't. And then when it does, people that are upset, like that's just not fair to anybody in the transaction. So I just think
Yeah.
transparency is just key.
And just good communication. And one last
Sure.
question for me. I see a lot of information, news, stories about land fraud. And so just fraud in general. How big is issue is this right now? And how is it happening? How would I know if I'm an owner or of a property if this is happening? Can you help us with that?
Oh, that's a great question, Mike. So right now, you guys, that is huge, huge. And I think that everybody needs to really be cautious of who they're dealing with. And I get right now our market is scarce and you're getting a call from a seller saying, hey, I want to sell some vacant land. And it's all done over the phone. You never meet the person. And that's the scenario. And that's how all these cases that we have been told about that have happened to people in our company that it's a seller that calls them, I want to sell a vacant land. This is where the property is. And these fraudsters are on top of their game. I mean, they're getting to the point where they're calling the treasurer's office, having their
Mm,
address changed because they're looking at the tax records to see where taxes are being sent to. So then they have the seller's address. That's what they're using. So when they send the contract, they have the current seller's address. um, they're really doing the legwork on this.
and
And I mean, it's super scary because
so
they know a lot of information about these sellers and so you have to almost, when you get those phone calls of, hey, I'm selling a vacant land, and yeah, that may sound great, but I think you have to have some kind of Zoom call, something to have a face to face with these sellers because a lot of times they don't want to send, they'll do the whole, oh, we're going to use our own notary. I travel a lot, so just send me the documents. My notary will notarize them. And in one case, they even had the notary stamp of the notary was
mm,
fraudulent.
wow.
It was a real notary out of a different state, but the stamp was fake. And that's what they use to notarize their documents. So, I mean, they are really doing some legwork to,
Scary step, and it's not
yeah.
going away. So, Kevin, when they call you, right, they'll call you and say, "Hey, I got some land that I want to sell." So, how do you protect yourself or how have you? What are the alarm bells for you?
Well, on as far as land goes, we don't do too much of land, but again, we
Yeah.
go back to the tax records and get the information from who's the one that's calling us and make sure the seller is on that tax record. And then if we get into contract and those type of things, then obviously Sandra and escrow officers are the ones that we lean on a lot. And
Yeah.
that's one thing about real estate. There is so many people involved in a transaction, and it's good to have a good group of people when you go under contract and those type of things. Because another thing that Sandra and other escrow officers do is that when we go under contract, we have earnest money. So the contract is very specific on what happens when somebody wants to cancel a contract. But once in a while, Sandra, I'm sure that you get into a situation where you might have to have your upper management or somebody get involved in it because it's kind of 50-50 on who is actually canceling this contract and who does that money go back to, because you are the third party and now you're slash referee on this, correct?
Sure. I mean, that happens all the time. And if at a branch level, I can make the decision for whatever the reason the cancellation came in. And a lot of the times it's just really reading the contract, um, and seeing what particular reason, why are the buyers getting denied? You know what? So if I can make that as at a branch level, I definitely make that as a branch level and say, hey, no, buyer gets their earnest money back or seller. Um, I get pushback sometimes, and then I have to take it, from the unhappy agent, that their client's not going their way for the client. And then I'll have to, take it above me to say, hey, just so they don't think that I am, being not the third disinterested party, I'll give it to upper management. They can look at it. And a lot of times it's the same decision, but when it's coming from a different person because they think that I have a bias, it's just different. But if I do it at a lot of the times, I handle it at the branch level because I know that buyers or whatever party is getting that money, a decision has to be made quickly.
Yep. And so we are very thankful for the opportunity to have Sandra and Mike with us today and talking a little bit about the escrow process. It's very important to get a good team together when you have a contract and everybody working together, communicating together. I think that's the number one thing. So everybody, we thank you for joining us today on Phoenix or Real Estate Know-Hows. And if you found this information helpful, please hit the like button, share button, subscribe. And as always, stay tuned for more valuable insights in the world of real estate. Until next time, be safe out there. Have a great day and be well. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
Kevin.
you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.